Well, hi there and welcome to the Richie Allen Television Show in association with davidike.com and Beyond Vision Media. My name is Richie Allen. Thanks for watching the programme. I hope you've enjoyed your week since we last saw one another. Now, coming up on the programme, we'll talk a little bit about the Labour leadership contest. We'll talk about David Cameron and extremism, and we'll also chat about the effects of austerity and bailouts on the most important people in Greece, and that is Greece's children. But before I get started on all of that, I want to tell you about John and Jackie Ward and baby Olivia. Now on Monday, earlier this week on Monday, on the Richie Allen radio show, I interviewed John and Jackie Ward and their grandparents, the young baby Olivia. And they had been looking after her because her mother has been dealing with mental health issues. God love her. It happens to a lot of families. And they were looking after her until social services turned up and said that they had a signed document from their daughter, Emmeline, saying that the child could be fostered. This is a terrible thing. So the child was taken away. Initially, they said to the grandparents, look, we're just going to give you some respite from looking after baby Olivia, but give us some time and we'll ensure that she comes back and that she stays with you, her grandparents. But that's not what happened. There was a court case. These court cases are held in secret. The grandparents could have had representation, but because of the cost of it, they couldn't manage that. So they weren't present at the hearing. And ultimately what the judge decided was that 58-year-old Jackie and 70-year-old John were basically too old to care for their granddaughter, while their mother is unable to look after her. And on July the 31st, and I'm not making any of this up, it's all true, on July the 31st, they will have to say goodbye to baby Olivia for the last time because the order has been put in for her to be adopted. And they will not see her again unless she chooses to look for her grandparents and her mother when she's 18 years old. This sort of thing makes me very angry, but I'm not going to rant about it. Congratulations to the Daily Mail and to one or two other newspapers for covering this week. I was interested to see on the various social media pages I'm involved in, people saying, oh, there's two sides to every story. There's no two sides here. There's no two sides here. John was a fireman. A bit of a legend, John. 70-year-old John, lovely guy, spoke to him on the radio, background check fantastic, no problems with the law. Jackie, beautiful woman, lovely woman, still working. These are wonderful people. They're not going to see their grandchild again if the state has its way. From the Daily Mail story, before we move on, I really want to say this. Steve Baker, who's a Tory MP, fair play to you, Steve, by the way. I'm not a fan of democracy or parliamentary democracy. I'll get into that shortly. But Steve, who's a member of the Commons All-Party Group on Adoption and Fostering, or he was anyway, says it is disturbing that it has been alleged that the mother has signed paperwork she may not have been in a position to fully understand. This is a very serious allegation. They apparently went to the hospital where Emmeline, the mother, was being treated and got her to sign over these papers. This is shocking. I would hope, he says, that steps will be taken to give these grandparents a fair chance to make their case to look after their own grandchildren. And a fellow Tory, Dr. Sarah Wollaston, who sat on the same group, the All-Party Group on Adoption and Fostering, she said clearly the needs of children are paramount, and we shouldn't allow preconceptions about people's ages when they are perfectly capable of taking on the role of carer. John Hemming, former Liberal Democrat MP, who has always had a lot to say about this, he runs the Justice for Families campaign, the campaign group, I should say. He's accused local authorities of working to adoption targets. And I've gotten into this on previous Richie Allen television and radio shows, the massive money. There's a massive industry, £1 billion industry every year. Look, on behalf of John and Jackie Ward, because we're still over a week away till the 31st of July, please go and find your MP, your local MP on the internet. You can do it, Google it, and you will find how to email them. Send them an email and tell them not in your name. And let's hope something can be done for these lovely people, John and Jackie Ward, that they can look after their baby granddaughter, Olivia. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful that this is happening in 2015 in Britain and anywhere else. I'm going to leave that there for now. Good luck, John and Jackie. I know you'll be looking at this. Also on Monday of this week, British Prime Minister David Cameron addressed the nation from a school in Birmingham, and he laid out what he called a 5-year plan to tackle extremism in Britain. Take a listen.
Wherever we're from, whatever our background, whatever our religion, there are things we share together. We're all British. We respect democracy and the rule of law. We believe in freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of worship, equal rights regardless of race, sex, sexuality, or faith. We believe in respecting different faiths, but also expecting those faiths to support the British way of life. These are British values and are underpinned by distinct British institutions. Our freedom comes from our parliamentary democracy. The rule of law exists because of our independent judiciary. This is the home that we're building together, whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, or Sikh. Whether you were born here or born abroad, we can all feel part of this country, and we must now all come together and stand up for our values with confidence and with pride.
We'll hear more from Cameron shortly, but let's go over the points he made there one by one. He said we respect democracy and the rule of law. He said we believe in freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and then he talked about equal rights. I'm going to take those points one by one. On democracy, this man is currently governing the United Kingdom with 24% of the popular vote. It's very important to remember that. 24%. I'm not going to bore you with a long-winded speech about electoral reform. I'd like to, but I won't. And why proportional representation is better than first past the post and all of that. I would argue it is, even though I don't believe in democracy. I don't believe in parliamentary democracy. It isn't working. But in England, it's a joke. Speaking of Hayden earlier on, from the Live League show, of course, on liveleague.com, and we were remarking, both of us, that UKIP got several million votes in the most recent election in May, but yet has only got one member of parliament in the House. Now, as I said, I detest political parties and most politicians, but you get the point. Cameron waxed lyrical about the rule of law. Let's talk about the rule of law. Not long after Cameron became Prime Minister, it's very important to remember this because it's never spoken of, or it hasn't been spoken of since, he appointed Jeremy Hunt as Culture Secretary. Now, you will know Jeremy Hunt because he's currently the Health Secretary. Why is that relevant, Richie, to the rule of law? Well, Cameron specifically appointed Jeremy Hunt as Culture Secretary because Hunt was going to have to make a decision on whether or not Rupert Murdoch's News Corp company would be allowed to buy up the entire stake in British Sky Broadcasting, Sky B. That was the only reason Cameron appointed Jeremy Hunt. That's corruption. I remember presenting radio programmes for mainstream radio stations back then and speaking to people writing for The Independent and The Guardian, and they were bewildered as to why David Cameron wasn't forced to resign as Prime Minister at that time when making a decision like that. So let's not talk about the rule of law. David Cameron is a criminal. It's as simple as that. You know, he's a proven criminal, and he's your Prime Minister. Rule of law, eh? My arse, one of the most corrupt politicians in the world. Let's talk about corruption. His current Home Secretary, Theresa May, another horrible woman. She's the woman who placed Elizabeth Butler Sloss and Fiona Woolf as heads of the historic sex abuse inquiry, knowing full well that they were connected to people like Leon Britton, who's dead now, the guy who lost the dossier, and who was named this week by Sky News and others as government documents that Sky were desperate to get a hold of. Basically named people like Heyman, of course, and Britain and all of that. So she appointed people knowing that they were connected to these people. She should be serving 10 years in jail today, Theresa May. That's what you should get for that. When you try to pervert the course of justice. If Evil Marty murders somebody and gives me the murder weapon and I bury it somewhere, I didn't kill the person, but I'm perverting the course of justice. That's what Theresa May is doing. Let's not talk about the rule of law and democracy. And democracy. We've sent planes to bomb targets in Syria. We found out through Reprieve this week, the great Reprieve pressure group here in England, through freedom of information requests that they wanted, that UK pilots are embedded with US forces and are basically, and have been since September, carrying out bombing raids inside Syria when Parliament expressly voted against this very thing. And only 3 weeks ago, Michael Fallon, lawyer-in-chief of the Conservative Party, when answering a question in the Houses of Parliament, said that for Britain to get involved with bombing raids against ISIS in Syria, we would have to come back to the House again, he said, knowing full well that Britain was involved since last September. These are fucking maniacal liars of the worst kind. So I'll take no lecture from David Cameron about democracy. He talks about freedom of the press. He wants Ofcom, which is the broadcasting regulatory authority in Britain, to be given new powers to take action against foreign channels that broadcast hate speechers. Hate speechers? Hate speakers, speechers. That's irony for you. And while they're talking about that, taking action against people, a counter-terrorism presentation, which was given to nursery, primary school teachers and others, listed Occupy London activists, as well as climate groups, as threats to safety. I'm making none of this up. Read the Telegraph this week. Anti-capitalist protesters from the group Occupy London were named alongside Al-Qaeda and the IRA as potential terrorist attackers in the United Kingdom in a presentation given by the London police. So the London police, directed by Theresa May, are saying that Occupy activists and climate groups, people who are climate change activists, people who believe in it, by the way, I don't, are possible threats to security. And the British newspaper The Guardian actually obtained a slideshow being used by the police. They're preparing for a possible Charlie Hebdo type attack here in London. I'm not going to get into that because I could be here all day. Continuing the theme of freedom of speech, Cameron next gets into conspiracy theories.
We should challenge the ludicrous conspiracy theories of the extremists. The world is not conspiring against Islam. The security services aren't behind terrorist attacks. Our new prevent duty for schools is not about criminalising or spying on Muslim children. This is paranoia in the extreme. In fact, that duty will empower parents and teachers to protect children from all forms of extremism, whether Islamist extremism or neo-Nazi extremism. We should challenge together the conspiracy theories about our Muslim communities too, and I know how much pain these can cause. We must stand up to those who try to suggest there's some kind of secret Muslim conspiracy to take over government, or that Islam and Britain are somehow incompatible. People who say these things are trying to undermine our shared values and make Muslims feel like they don't belong here, and we must not let these conspiracy theorists win.
Now, he's mentioned challenging the notion that the security services are behind terrorist attacks several times in the last 18 months. Why? Why harp on about that? Are they worried that because many of these terror events all seem to have the same narrative, Muslim extremist, previously known to the intelligence agencies, trained in the Middle East, was able to swan in and out of whatever country he was living in to train with all the madmen, but then foolishly left documents behind at the scene to identify them? And of course, not to mention that many times there are drills going on simulating these very things. Is that what this bastard is worried about? That even those who would have called people like me tinfoil hat conspiracy nuts in the past, even those people are going, you know what? Some of these stories are kind of the same, aren't they? So why harp on about it? I want you to listen. I've done this, not this particular clip, but I've referenced Annie Mash on before. She's obviously former MI5 officer, blew the whistle along with David Shaler on MI5 eavesdropping on and bugging people like Jack Straw and others at the time. Amazing, really, when you think back to it. She went on the run with David Shaler. Now she's an activist and tells people, you know, the truth about what these agencies do. I want you to listen to her talking about Madrid and New York and why we should question the narratives of these terror attacks. Have a look.
There's also a very strange coincidence as well. There was a man called Peter Power who runs a company called Visor Consultants, which specialises in running terrorism drills so that people can learn how to respond. He's a former senior counter-terrorism officer from the Metropolitan Police as well. And he was running an exercise that morning. And after the bombings had occurred, or the explosions had occurred, he went on the national media to talk about it. And he said live that he was running this operation, and halfway through the operation, the attacks occurred. And they occurred in precisely the same stations at precisely the same times as the ones in his drill. And he said in those interviews that the hair stood up on the back of his neck because of the coincidence. Now, I don't know. It certainly would be intriguing to find who he was running those drills for, who was paying him, who had organised it. But also, it's part of a pattern for other incidents, like the Madrid bombings, like 9/11 itself. Before these big, high-profile terrorist atrocities, there seems to be some sort of security drill going on, which can confuse the initial response to a live attack. Whether that was the case in London, we don't know. But again, we haven't had any form of independent inquiry. We've just had a faceless bureaucrat write an anonymous official narrative, which has now been shown to be full of factual errors.
Now, Annie mentioned Madrid and New York, of course. You know, this was filmed before the Boston bombing and other things, but also before the attack at the Chocolate Cafe in Sydney, where hostages were killed. And of course, that's a terrible thing. I'm not saying it isn't. But doesn't get spoken about very often. A year before that attack in Sydney, there was a drill in the same street, a year to the day, enacting the very same scenario around that chocolate shop. No wonder Cameron and his mates are terrified of so-called conspiracy theorists. They want to shut down people like me. Now, I don't have a messianic complex. I'm nobody, as I said last week, and I represent nobody. I make a show, a radio show and a TV show. It goes out to people, but I'm not the BBC, I'm not Sky, and I don't have a persecution complex. But people like us, people like LiveLeak.com. Now, LiveLeak don't do what I do. They're apolitical. They don't have a political point of view on anything, which is admirable. But they put stuff out there that indirectly contradicts the bullshit from the government. That's who they're going to come after. They're going to come after people like LiveLeak.com. They're going to come after me. Again, I have no persecution complex. When I say people like me, I mean others making programmes like these. Because we're onto them. We're onto their lies and their tyranny. He also told a massive lie when he said teachers wouldn't be spying on children. That's exactly what they will be doing. And you can see on screen, you can see a link to a story on the BBC where teachers, including a lovely woman I've mentioned before called Sian Bloor, very smart woman, NUT delegate, National Union of Teachers delegate and primary school teacher here. Jan Nielsen says, teacher in Wandsworth, we are expected to be frontline stormtroopers who listen, spy and notify the authorities of students whom we are suspicious of. She told delegates of a Muslim pupil who had been questioned over comments he made after Friday prayers, even though he had been making an argument against extremism. David Cameron is a disgusting pathological liar. He's a dangerous madman. And he's our Prime Minister. He next talks about ISIS. Have a look.
This is a group that throws people off buildings, that burns them alive. And as Channel 4's documentary last week showed, its men rape underage girls and stone innocent women to death. This isn't a pioneering movement. It is a vicious, brutal, and fundamentally abhorrent existence. And here's my message to any young person here in Britain thinking of going out there. You won't be some valued member of a movement. You are cannon fodder for them. They will use you. If you're a boy, they will brainwash you, strap bombs to your body and blow you up. If you are a girl, they will enslave and abuse you. That is the sick and brutal reality of ISIL.
These are murderous, evil madmen. Cameron is right. The only thing we'll agree on, they're lunatics. They throw gay people off buildings. Then they stone them to death when they don't die from the fall. they shoot people to death in massive numbers and force people to watch it. Of course! Some of the stuff in the Daily Mail and in some other newspapers, you have to wonder about it. You know, the manuals and the rape manuals and all the stuff that he put in there. There isn't a day goes by without a story about ISIS. You have to wonder about some of that propaganda. But the central idea that they're out there killing people, yep, absolutely right. They are. They're nutters. They're armed to the teeth. But as we've explained on this programme time and time again, and on the radio show, they're our nutters. Have a listen to constitutional scholar and attorney Bruce Fine. Listen to Bruce.
Whether we liked it or not, it is true that people like Saddam Hussein, Colonel Gaddafi, they're sort of successors, if you can, to the Ottoman Empire that had survived for hundreds of years in that area and had kept internecine warfare, so to speak, at bay by tyranny in the same mold of the Ottoman Empire. Their governments were not ideal, but they were not disturbing the entire world, and certainly not the United States. We went in, overthrew Saddam, and now we've got virtual mayhem in Iraq between the Sunnis and the Shias and the Kurds. Power vacuum then lets ISIS, sect from the Sunnis, come in and take over a substantial portion of the country. There's not a government that commands the respect of all the Iraqi people, so it remains really in almost a never-never land of lawlessness, and the same has happened in Libya. Colonel Gaddafi wasn't ideal. He did, however, renounce weapons of mass destruction. He paid reparations for the killings of the Lockerbie bombing incident. He was secular. He was an opponent of radical Islam, and yet we overthrow him. He's murdered. We have a country now, like Iraq, beset by internecine strife and warfare. ISIS now has emerged as a factor in Libya. And using the weapons there, it's entered into the domain in Syria. We're now involved in Syria, trying to indirectly overthrow President Assad. We may get something worse. But the overall theory is that when you go and destroy political cultures and countries, create power vacuums because there's nothing there to succeed the person you're overthrowing, you're naturally inviting the most unscrupulous to come to the top.
It isn't bad planning, it isn't stupidity, it isn't incompetence. We go back to debathification and all of that. They want you to believe it's incompetence. It isn't. These are our madmen. Destabilise, cause chaos. Listen, there's a number of websites I can direct you to. But I say again, do your own research. You know, these guys are having weapons dropped to them directly. They really are. I kid you not. And there's an abundance of evidence on liveleak.com to back that up. And I'm talking about the apolitical live leak. They don't make any points with it. They allow people to put videos on their platform. People do. A video on there this week which basically shows how these guys are being given weapons and money. All right? We're going to take a break right there. You're watching the Richie Allen Television Show in association with Beyond Vision Media and, of course, davidike.com. Back in about 90 seconds.
This man owns a small business. He works hard in his business. He spends his days dealing with customers, suppliers, and general aggravation. He certainly doesn't want to spend his days dealing with the VAT man as well. After all that, you'll often find him at evenings and weekends working on his books. Or not. Sound familiar? With the high levels of compliance and the severe penalties for getting it wrong, wouldn't it be better if someone else could find any problems before the taxman does? You've got better things to do with your time than worry about your books. Think of all the other things you could be doing instead of crunching numbers. Just put all your paperwork into a box and let Accounts Direct take care of everything. Bookkeeping, management, accounts, tax returns, VAT returns, payroll, and more. Accounts Direct. Accountants on your side.
Welcome back to the Richie Allen Show in association with davidicke.com and Beyond Vision Media. It's plug time. It's plug time. Check out the Live Leak show every Thursday at 10:30 p.m. BST. It's absolutely fantastic. It's all points are equal points, funny, hilarious at times, but also very pointed and very sharp in terms of commentary on some of the issues that we talk about on this programme as well. Join John, Evil Marty J and Hayden Hewitt on liveleak.com every Thursday at 10:30 p.m. BST. It's really good. Also check out davidicke.com/headlines. It's about the best collection on the internet of all the important independent media stories as well as the mainstream news as well. It's difficult not to swear. For me, it's got nothing to do with being Irish. It's a gross generalisation. Although we are associated as people who do like to swear liberally and swear in a funny way. But we do live in a sick world. A really sick fucking world. I want you to have a look at this. This is Sky News this week.
This little girl is a few months old, but she has no name. None of the babies in this special unit do. These are Athens' abandoned children. Their parents have left them, but the hospital hope they will come back. Some do. Most don't.
In truth, the problem has increased. Many women give birth here and then just leave the hospital, leaving their child here for us to look after. One reason is that there are mothers who believe they can't bring up their child, so they leave them here. The other reason, because of the wave immigrants.
The staff here are very protective. They will look after the babies until they're about 6 months old and then hand them on to an orphanage or to care.
Some children are taken into care because their parents can no longer afford to look after them, to clothe them, to feed them, to bring them up. But they're the few. For most children, it's because their parents have become alcoholics or abusers or they're drug addicts or because they've committed suicide. And that is the indirect consequence of the economic crisis in Greece.
Alcoholics, suicides, depressions, poverty. What the fuck else can you expect when you destroy a country like Greece has been destroyed? And while I'm doing this now, it's just been announced that overnight, we're talking about the week's news, as you know, so when you see this, you might see this 3 or 4 days later, you might see it very quickly. They've taken a crucial step, have the Greeks, to getting their bailout because they passed the second set of reforms. And I'm going to quote Hayden Hewitt here because he's absolutely right. The Greeks are being reformed the way the Jews were being reformed by the Germans. And that's totally true. This is fucking genocide. Does anybody give a shit about women leaving hospital beds in the dead of night? Imagine how they must feel. Imagine it. If you have a child, I don't. Can you imagine having to walk away from your blood because you have nothing? Hoping to Jesus that somebody in a better position than you might end up looking after your child. You know? I wonder, does Juncker, Jean-Claude Juncker, does Dieselblum, does Merkel, does all the other hateful fucking Nazis, did they watch these reports and see what they're doing to these people? And what about that scumbag Alexis Tsipras? I told you about him. I told you here and I told him on the radio show. He was a Trojan horse. Slipped in to make it look like there was opposition to it. A fucking actor, not a politician. Vote against it. I'm urging you to vote against it, he said. And he went to the referendum. And then he went and he fucking agreed to it. Come on, people. How much more of it do we have to see before people understand what's really going on here? You know? Fair play to Sky News for doing the report. Oh, They can't even find assets anymore. Everything they have is gone. They can't find anymore. The austerity is killing people. Put yourself in the place of Greek people, please. Imagine it. As I said, the four revolutionaries, Varoufakis and Tsipras, those lying bastards will go on to well-paid jobs in the private sector. They will. They will. Varoufakis particularly. You know, the guy who was at the LBJ school in Texas, the guy who lectured at Cambridge. This motherfucker will go and work in a 7-figure salary job while Greek people are dying on the streets of poverty and abandoning their children. Fuck it, you know. Fucked a lot of it. And also this week, Richard Kerr. He was at Kincora Boys Home. There he is. He gave a very powerful interview to Exaro News. Check out Exaro News, by the way, online. They're very good. And he said something that we spoke about on this programme some time ago. That child abuse at the children's home in Belfast was actually, a lot of it was about gaining political leverage over others during the times of the Troubles. This is how sick this is. Have a look at Richard Kerr talking to Exaro News.
Well, like in horror story, some of us were used to have leverage over others in political systems. People wanted to gain higher in rank, and those who wanted to try to bring some peace to Northern Ireland. So we were used as collateral damage. That's what I want to say. The Kincora story, in a nutshell, it's about people in power who try to use boys like myself to gain leverage over others for political reasons during the Troubles. But in a nutshell, I want people to learn from the past as well, that this can never happen again. And Kincora was basically, they lied back then, and they told us to keep quiet. And I'm just saying, if anybody has a voice out there, don't stop talking, keep talking, because there's somebody out there will listen to you.
And that's it in a nutshell. To repeat what Richard was saying to Exaro News, we must never allow them cover it up. They'll fucking try, you know. They will. They're doing it right now. As you're watching this, they're doing it now. They've got Justice Lowell Goddard in from New Zealand with her madness, you know. They'll cover it up. But I want to tell you this, hundreds of people, sometimes thousands, give up their weekends and go to London, they go to Manchester, they go to Nottingham, and they protest the continuing cover-up of child abuse by the establishment. Mickey Summers, Joe Public, Martin Houston, there's so many of them. Some of them are victims, some of them are not. Don't ignore them. Don't walk past them in Nottingham and in Manchester and in London. Don't do that. Spend some time with them, whether it's 15, 20 minutes. Stand alongside them. Don't allow it. It's not good enough that this week we get a little nugget. Oh, here are 4 names. They're all fucking dead. What good is it? They're all dead. Sky News, oh, exclusive, yeah, our freedom of information. Listen, they're all dead, Sky. Doesn't matter. Where were you when David Icke was talking about it in 1999 in The Biggest Secret? Where were you then, Sky News, when some of these people were alive? He named Leon Britton, Heyman, all these people, named them. It's easy to talk about them when they're dead, isn't it? There's plenty of them alive. Let's talk about the ones who are alive. Look, it's our time to create a better future for ourselves. And you're not going to do that by sitting on your arse. Simple as that. This issue will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so long as you stand by the people fighting for justice. On a week when the police, I'm told again, are harassing certain victims for screaming from the rooftops about the cover-up. I'm talking about Melanie Shaw, whom, as I do this today, I understand has been approached by the police again Look for Melanie Show online and read more about her. As all of this is going on, the undeniable mass murderer and psychopath and war criminal Anthony Blair has been flown in. Well, he wasn't flown in specifically to pervert the course of the Labour leadership contest. He's speaking to a think tank called Progress, a progressive think tank apparently this week. And while there, he's been piping up about the Labour leadership election contest. The party, of course, is currently being stewarded by Harriet Harman. I would like to think that Labour Party supporters across Britain were tearing up their membership cards this week after she told parliamentary colleagues of hers to abstain from voting on the budget. We'll come back to Tony Blair in a second. This is important, this. Nearly 50 Labour MPs defied her, thankfully, and voted against the Tory welfare bill, saying that its cuts would destroy child tax credits and would make child poverty even worse than what it already is. 48, that's exactly a fifth of all Labour MPs, voted against the second reading of the Welfare Reform and Work Bill, despite her saying that you shouldn't vote at all. And you think you live in a democracy, eh? Amazing. Jeremy Corbyn was the only leadership contender with the guts to vote against it. He's anti-austerity. Like I said, we live in a democracy. Tony Blair has flown in. He's got plenty to say about Jeremy Corbyn. Have a listen.
So let me make my position clear. I wouldn't want to win on an old-fashioned leftist platform. In other words, even if I thought it was the route to victory, I wouldn't take it. We should use defeat as an opportunity. We have to rebuild. But approached in the right way, this is an exciting and not a depressing challenge.
So here we have a failed Middle East peace envoy, failed human being, a convert to Catholicism, figure that one out by the way, utter fucking madman who killed 1 million people in Iraq and displaced 2 million more, who still wants to bomb Syria and Iraq again, by the way, because it'll get rid of ISIS. Don't you wish he would just fuck the fuck off once and for all? Spend the millions that you've earned through your corruption and the millions you earned from your speaking tours after you left office. Labour supporters around Britain like Jeremy Corbyn, because he's anti-austerity, he voted against the Iraq war. He was unbelievably critical of Tony Blair at the time. Not only that, but when Blair was giving evidence to the Chilcot inquiry a few years ago, the Chilcot inquiry, holy Jesus, we could be here all day talking about that. But Corbyn used to do opinion pieces for Russia Today, basically lambasting Blair's testimony at the inquiry. That's where this is really coming from. That's why they want Corbyn. Have a look at Jeremy Corbyn. This is him talking.
No, what we're doing is putting a burden on the current generation. We're putting a burden on those that have nowhere to live. We're putting a burden on those that are on low wages, of young people leaving university with huge debts. We're putting a burden on the present generation. Take it over the longer period. Protect this generation and develop so that the next generation is better off.
So if austerity continues up until the next general election, what do you envisage happening to the country?
Well, if it continues through to 2020, many public services will have reduced or disappeared. The cuts in funding for councils will lead to a deepening crisis in adult social care and all the horrors that goes with that. The continuing cuts in welfare benefits will lead to greater levels of poverty. There's a lot of problems down the road. I think there's going to be a lot of opposition to this government. They only have a small majority in Parliament. They're not going to have it all their own way. I think it's going to be a very interesting debate. All those people that have come here today, in their many, many thousands, are indicating that there's a lot of people do have an aspiration for a more collective approach to the problems of this country and a different world.
I don't really know how sincere Jeremy Corbyn is. How the hell would I know? I like the sound of him. You know I don't believe in politics. I don't believe in democracy. We live in corporatocracy times. Corporatocratic. I'm going to invent a term now. Yeah, I believe we live in a corporatocracy, stroke fascism. That's where we live. Don't like it. Corbyn, I don't know. Yeah, he did stand out strongly against the Iraq war. He says he's anti-austerity. He's leading the polls, though, in the race to become the next leader of the Labour Party, and some people don't like that. In fact, the mainstream news doesn't like it, because if you were watching Sky, BBC, Channel 4 yesterday, I'm not making this up, the presenters, the anchors of those programmes are constantly talking about what Labour needs to do to stop him winning. That isn't objective reporting. That is disgraceful. That is slanted, biased commentary. Every one of them is at it. Kay Burley yesterday, Dermot Murnaghan, all of them. You know, what have they got to do? What have Labour got to do to stop him winning? What the fuck, like? The BBC today, Liz Kendall, one of the contenders, by the way, along with Andy Burnham. And do you know there's such muppets I can't even remember the fourth one? Yvette Cooper, isn't it, Hayden? It's Yvette Cooper, it is. Yes. Ed Balls' wife, yeah, thanks, mate. How sexist is that? Ed Balls' wife. It doesn't get any more sexist than that. Ed Balls' wife, because he's a real politician. Of course, I don't mean that. We'll leave that in. He was never a real politician anyway. Absolutely not. She's been saying she won't pull out of the contest. She's been asked to pull out of the contest to back others to try and thwart Jeremy Corbyn. It's a joke. It's all a joke. Corbyn must be sincere, because they wouldn't be absolutely crapping themselves at the prospect of him winning the Labour leadership contest. Look, it's crazy. I'm going to leave it there this week. I want to thank you for watching the programme. I want to get you to go to liveleak.com as well. Look for Beyond Vision Media, and of course watch Evil Marty, Jay, John and Hayden Thursday nights at 10:30 p.m. BST. But before we leave this week, I want to just give just another plug to the story of the Wards, John and Jackie. Read about it on the Daily Mail. Read about it on the Richie Allen Show page on Facebook. And please, please use a basic search engine feature to find your local MP and write them a letter and say you do not want to live in a world where these people cannot see their grandchild again for 15 years because they're too old to look after her. This is tyranny, folks. I'll leave you on that. Don't like leaving on a negative, but that's all there is this week. Thank you for watching the programme. Stay safe, look after yourselves and one another. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.